Welcome to Perspective in Practice. I'm your host, Rachel Sadoff, and today we have with us Danaya Wilson, founder and CEO of Better Certify. How are you today, Danaya?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Can you share with us a little bit about your background and how your parents' asbestos regulation company kind of influenced your career path?
Yeah. So, um, I always like to joke that I've been in the asbestos industry since I could walk. It's felt like that because it was so entrenched, ingrained in my entire family's and my upbringing. But how I got into the industry was I graduated in 2007 with a degree in marketing. And it was one of the worst times to graduate with an undergrad in marketing because the economy was kind of crashing at that time. And I was going on what I thought were interviews for normal entry level marketing position. And it ended up being door to door salesman. And I was shocked, right? And so I'm still living at my parents' house at that time. My parents are starting up their hazardous material abatement firm, and I kind of was just like very upset about this situation and I'm supposed to be acting like an adult, and I feel like I'm just stuck still being a child, asking my parents for help and guidance in this point. And my dad said, "Well, why don't you start working with our company? Just write our business plan." And I really stuck with that. So I kind of got into the professional side of hazardous material abatement just by kind of living at their house and working for them from home.
That's funny. That's funny. I graduated a few years after you in the same kind of situation with a marketing advertising degree and just like, what do I do right now with this? Because nobody's hiring. And that kind of set me on my career trajectory too. So that's hilarious that we kind of have that in common. So, how did you identify the need for online learning in such like a highly regulated industry?
Yeah. Okay. So when I started working for my parents' hazardous material abatement firm. I worked there for 8 years, worked my way up from um, just doing administrative tasks. And then I went to being a project manager. And then I became a branch manager. So I was running their entire corporate branch, which was out of Denver, Colorado, doing about $7 to $8 million worth of abatement work in a year. And I was really feeling unfulfilled. Quite honestly, I was going on job walks. A lot of times I would have to be crawling through crawl spaces, going in attics. Definitely a very male dominated space, as well as not using my education that I had worked so hard for. And I started, ironically, my solution to this was to get more education. So I ended up going back to get my master's degree. And when I was in my master's program, I was going for organizational leadership, and I got an emphasis in e-learning and curriculum design. So one of my assignments was to look at your current industry and see a way that you can innovate in it. And so that's when I kind of was like, it really seems weird that people are driving 4 hours to take a 4 hour class. They have to do this annually. How come this cannot be completed online? Because I had looked at the curriculum, and the curriculum itself wasn't something that couldn't be made into online learning modules. And then I started to look at the regulations and see if maybe that was the reason why companies were innovating in that space. And I came across this memo from the EPA 2007, and I was looking at this in 2012. And it basically was a memo to all of the states because just a little bit of information about the EPA regulation and administration for asbestos, it used to be done from the top down, and then they pushed it out to the states. They said, no longer are we were going to do this on the federal level. We're going to push it out to the states to administer this program. So then in 2007, they write this memo saying that all of this learning can be done online. But they were basically advising the states to accept online learning as part of their regulation to satisfy the regulation. But nobody was innovating on that.
Yeah.
Nobody was creating solutions for that. And so that's how that's how we kind of saw the opportunity and really built our business um, from the ground up to satisfy this industry that didn't even know they wanted it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Why do you think people weren't innovating on it at the time? Was it just because e-learning was so new? They like what's your thoughts?
I think there were a couple different things. I think e-learning was new. Certainly, I know for a fact it was because the vast majority of our students still tell us to this day, and we're Better Certified hitting its 10-year anniversary this year. They're still saying to this day that this would be the first type of online learning that they've ever taken. So I think it was that. I also think that there was, so asbestos was regulated in the late 1970s. And I think a lot of people started their business. And so at that time, when we were entering the market, we were really entering in a new niche, but with a demographic, a target market that had been operating the same way for so long. So you're talking about 3 decades, 4 decades of them going to the same training provider for these solutions for their annual renewals. And we are coming in and being like, oh, but there's a whole new way of learning. And it's a new way of learning that you've never done before. I think that there was a little bit of that pullback for the new. I've been doing this. I've been going to Joe's training shop for years, for decades. Why would I take this online? So it took a while for people to trust us. What we did a little bit differently to build that confidence up was we worked really hard to align our courses with the regulatory agencies in the areas that we were going to. So if we were going to start working or offering our courses in Kentucky, then we would work with like the Kentucky Department of Air Quality or Environment and make sure that what we were teaching was exactly what they wanted to regulate and administer. And it built that confidence with our target market.
Yeah, so it sounds like there was quite a process of just kind of being strategic and just kind of like planning your marketing and planning, what you were building for your audience and, really assessing kind of their need.
Yeah. So when we're talking about this from like the strategic part of how we built the business, I really had to look at one, I wasn't going to take any outside investment. So I had to build this completely by bootstrapping. I didn't know anything about online learning other than I had done online learning through the course of my education.
Oh.
And so I had to figure out, okay, now am I going to buy an LMS? Am I going to build an LMS? Which at that time, again, we had no money whatsoever. So I really had to figure out how to do this on a shoestring budget and bootstrap. So my first thought was like, okay, well, I need an e-learning development company. And I remember going to a couple companies that were large at that time, and they gave me quotes of like over $2 million. Yeah. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this off the ground doing that. So what I did was I ended up doing a mixture of Upwork and getting some freelancers that would help me, but then I would also learn Captivate on my own. Right? Get the book and really start to go through how can I learn and teach myself to be able to do this? And I did that for the first 5 years, just me developing the classes and then having someone from Upwork, a freelancer that would come in and kind of help me finesse things. And then so to make sure that I was going to be making money at this endeavor, what I did was I looked at which states would allow us to offer our training with little to no barriers. So which regulations were really in line with what our courses were going to teach.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe just a little bit easier, or maybe not necessarily easier, but less barriers in the way. So we go through years, and I'll get to that, but we go through years of approval processes. But there are some states where it's maybe only 30 days. So those are the ones that we really targeted so that we knew we could go to market quick. Because, I'm investing all of this capital up front, my capital to get the product ready to go, I needed to get it in front of students as soon as possible. So with that, we found 10 states that would allow us to operate. And I took how many regulated individuals are in those 10 states and then basically divided our tuition by the total available market. And that gave me at least our hope, if we could capture all of the market in those areas, this is how much we could be getting on an annual basis. And I ended up just using the budget of 10%. So 10% of the total available market, that was my operating budget. And that helped me scale really tightly to make sure that if at all my product was going to take many years to get to higher of a 10% market pull, at least I could sustain myself without having to take outside investors.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you were able to really develop a strong strategic plan um,
Mhm.
that helped you kind of really look at the market and say, these are the states that this is what we're going to do. These are the states we're going to target first. This is how we're going to do it. And this is, the budget that we have to work with to be successful without, finding investors and um taking money from outside sources. And now you're in how many states?
Oh goodness. So with I wish there was a simple answer. There's not because even like one class is available in different states.
Okay.
So we do have solutions that are available on a global basis and we have two approval. We have the US approval and then we have Canadian approval. And then we have several different states within there. So it's tough to say, but we do have now I would say like for these classes that were our initial classes that I worked so hard on, those ones I'd say we're in about 38 states.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, in a past conversation that you and I had, you kind of advised leaders to look at the cracks in the system and then turn them into opportunities rather than focusing more on the glamorous industries. Can you share
Mm.
a little bit more about that approach and why you think that's so important?
It definitely, you have to look at the long term. You really have to have that long term thinking. And if I was looking to get a return on my investment, a return on my hard work, or maybe even the lifestyle that would afford me time off and maybe six figures plus, I could not make that happen in 2 to 3 years. And that I think is a reality across a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I think that, well, I know my advice really is you have to look at the long term, and I kind of break my life as in in decades. So my 20s it was really about building the foundation and investing heavily into education, and then the 30s it was building my business and the foundation of my business and then crafting a way that I could work on my own. And what I needed to do in my 30s was really identify a niche in the market that I could stand out in. And sometimes those niches really aren't glamorous. They're more based off of need and underperforming segments that a lot of your competition is overlooking because maybe they're focusing too heavy on their return on the investment happening in a quicker manner. And it's quite honestly hard work. So, we still haven't got the official approval letter, but we just made history because we've been working with the EPA for 7 years. So, whereas I explained that the asbestos program isn't managed by the EPA anymore, the lead-based paint program is. So, we've been working with the EPA directly for 7 years to get the lead-based paint renewals to be done in an online. Will actually have to be a hybrid model. And it's rare to see a company that will not only invest capital up front, but know that they're not going to have a return on their investment for 7 years. I
Yeah.
mean, really, how do you make that work? And the only way we make it work is because I am laser focused on the fact that I want to make an impact and I want to change this industry. And then I'm able to keep our budgets so tight to make sure that we can slowly chip at these things without having to take outside funding. And I don't even think anybody would fund us because of that. longevity, to a return on our investment. But if we hadn't done these things, then individuals, like we have a good group of people in Turkey that take the lead-based paint renewals every 3 years. And if we didn't have that, they wouldn't be able to keep their certificates and compliance.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I think so many leaders are short-sighted and they don't look at the long game. They're looking at what are we doing this year? What are we doing in 2 or 3 years? They're not looking at what are we doing in 10 years? What are we doing in 20 years? And I feel like that can be a big differentiator in, successful leaders, like thinking about strategy, thinking about where we're going in the long term. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think it's that focusing on the end product,
Yeah.
right? And so then you're looking for your excitement, your completion rush to happen at the end. But what really is helpful is that as you're continuing to move forward and making these strides to that ultimate goal, there's success metrics that can be set up along the way. So if you like visually imagine it like we're climbing a mountain, each time you get to a new level, you can celebrate that as a win. And I think with us, that's been really helpful. Okay, so our first benchmark with the lead-based paint was discipline was to just get someone from the EPA willing to look at it. So
Mhm.
like that's a win in itself. Does that mean that it's the end of the project or can we get money from it? No, but it's an open door, right? So celebrating those little wins and getting excited about the process and the progress that you're making, I think can be really helpful instead of focusing on what's going to happen when we achieve the total goal.
Yeah, yeah. The little wins, that's, what keeps individuals, teams motivated is, setting those goals, like and having, the small goals, knowing what the big overall goal is, and then celebrating those wins. What are some different ways that you and your team have celebrated some of your shorter wins?
Hmm. So gosh, we have a Slack channel called Kudos. So we'll always post in there like little tiny wins or little tiny things that we get. And even it could be as big as like a client said we did really good here, or we got a 5-star review or something. But it also could be as small as like the EPA read my email. But I mean, there are these little things that are just those are what get us through the day. And then the other thing is like so while you're focused daily on those little wins, you really have to continue to give a progress report on how close you are to achieving the larger goal, right? And so that's another way that we do it is we kind of we have a weekly meeting and we talk about these things that are in the process and how much longer we have. And we have a lot of different ones that are in progress too. So it's important that we don't just focus on one thing. Maybe we have the ability to diversify and work on other things so we can kind of have success in this area when this area is just taking time. Because quite honestly, there's things that will sit on someone else's desk, not even our within our organization for years. And so we have to, we can't get bogged down by the stuff we can't control. So
Yeah,
we can kind of focus our efforts and our excitement on other things.
absolutely, absolutely. Like at Break the Norm Leadership, we're big at praise, recognition, and just kind of meeting people at the way they like to kind of celebrate their wins or achievements. And I think it's so crucial that organizations, leaders, managers be thinking about how you guys are celebrating those little wins. And it sounds
Mhm.
like you guys are doing it almost on a daily basis, which is amazing. And I would love to see more organizations, more teams doing that and really recognizing how individual tasks or individual things people are doing are implementing, or impacting the overall goal.
Mhm.
So how have grit and resilience shaped your journey as a leader and an entrepreneur? Because, as for some, you're working in an industry where return on invest, like the big return on investment is, long-term goal. So like grit and resilience, like you got to be the queen of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and also being a female in a very heavily male dominated industry, especially one that focuses so much on doing because it's a labor intensive industry. We are a subsidiary essentially of the construction industry. And so when I came in, I didn't approach the my career as something that I was going to learn from the field and rise up. Essentially, I came from the office and rose up. And so it was a complete different experience than my male counterparts were going through. Um, and one thing that I tried really hard to do was take it from the approach of observation as opposed to trying to overpower, or maybe a lot of women feel like they have to act like the men, show up very masculine to be able to be successful in a male dominated industry. And one thing that I felt that I kind of say was my secret weapon was that I watched from the outside and found ways to succeed by doing things differently than the males around me did. So when we talk about grit and resilience, we have to have confidence to be able to believe that our path is going to be the best path for ourselves. And especially when you're getting constant feedback that that's not the normal way of doing things, or maybe you're too much, or well, Danaya doesn't stay 2 hours after the normal work hours to get her work done. How is she getting so much work done? You have to have confidence in your own path to make sure that I think that's like the foundation of grit, right? Like you have to have that confidence to know that you are doing the things the best way possible for you. And then the resilience, especially now, I think that I am so focused on making an impact. I so badly want to change an industry. I so badly want to change a male dominated industry, that I figure I'm just going to work so hard at doing it. And maybe things don't work and we analyze that on a regular basis, but the passion is built on that ultimate hope of making that impact of change.
Yeah. Can you share a moment when you realized how your company has started to change the industry?
Man.
When you like
Well,
recognize that?
when if we go back to the strategic side of things, I had a budget that was if I can get 10 individuals a month. I just need 10 people taking this training on a month and I can pay my bills. And now we easily get 10 a day, easily. And yeah, it's an amazing thing because now we're at the point where we're starting to see people coming. We used to have to work so hard to get one student, right? Like banging down their door and being like, please just give us a try. And now we're starting to see like that natural um, incoming of students that are maybe hearing from a colleague or maybe hearing from their regulatory agency that that Better Certify is a good place to go for their training. So that's really exciting. I think that we're hearing less of this is the first time I've trained online, which is exciting in itself too, because that's showing that people and one thing I have to say about our demographic too is our individuals, our demographic that are taking the classes are 55, typically 55 and above. So we're making an impact with individuals that I think were overlooked when talking about online learning.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredible. Like I always, as a business owner myself, like it's always amazing when you look back on like a goal, a year ago, 5 years ago that you thought was like so hard. And, it's kind of the compound effect. You keep doing the same things and you build upon it and then you see that compounding result happen and now you're getting over 10, 12, 15, 20 students a day when, back then you were like, oh, we just want 10 a month
Yeah,
thing. And it's amazing to see that.
it is. And I have to comment, it reminds me of, we go back to that definition of insanity, right? Well, that's why entrepreneurship borderlines insanity to a certain extent, because you have to just be so tenacious and so determined when a lot of people around you are like, oh, this doesn't make sense.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think, as an entrepreneur too, you really have to surround yourself with other people with that kind of same tenacity and resilience that understands it. Too, like I always tell new entrepreneurs, only take advice from other entrepreneurs that have done it successfully.
Mm.
Because otherwise, like people always have opinions on how you should do it, but until they've had that experience of doing it themselves, like had that experience of paying payroll, had that experience of
Mm.
knocking on doors, making cold calls, things like that, like it's all lip service until they've done it themselves
Yeah.
and are responsible for the results. So let's talk a little bit about your book. So share with me about your book.
Yeah, so I wrote a book, Changemakers Wanted. I am insanely passionate about the future generations of women in leadership positions, and so I wrote a book, um, kind of stemming from I became a mother in late 2022, and my daughter, I'm looking at her and I'm thinking about what is it going to look like? What is the corporate culture going to look like when you become a leader, if you want to become a leader? And I noticed that there were some key things that I needed a little bit more information on. So I started this book, basically to answer questions on why are there not a lot of women in leadership positions? And then what can we do as a society and what can we do as CEOs to encourage more women to be in leadership positions? So Changemakers Wanted is not written from the perspective of an expert, but a learner, which I am, and came to the conclusion that we needed to really tackle flexible work environments and we needed to look at the childcare crisis. And so together between those two things, I come up with, here's the problem, but I also present solutions. And I think that's just a different approach to these women empowerment books that we've seen in the past. And my book itself takes you from, instead of going to like the lean, do you remember Lean In, the movement, like Lean In when it was like 2013? It takes you from leaning into rising up. So it's a different way of approaching women's empowerment.
Yeah, I know. That's awesome. Like, there's such a gap that needs to be bridged for women. For so many years, we haven't had women leaders or women entrepreneurs, and now we're getting some. And now there's just this big change in the workforce of, we have baby boomers out there still working, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, and all the way down, trickling down. And it's just like, it's just this place out here where it's like, how do we bridge that gap too of just women lifting other women up and then just passing on that knowledge to just continue to raise more women up.
Yeah, and I think that it's very timely too. We're all very aware of our political climate, and it's it's a book that can instill hope in a very hopeless feeling present. And I think that a lot of people, especially myself, I was raised in a very toxic and traumatic environment, and coming from that, how within chaos can I be performing? How can I still show up for people that are important to me? And then how can I impact change? And I think that this book really gives a blueprint for women, for change makers, even men to be present, even though there's a lot of heavy stuff going on around us.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little advice. So if as a woman, if I wanted to create my own company, kind of similar to you, seeing a gap or an opportunity, or, I know in past conversations you said sometimes the gap comes from frustration in your life, where you experience something, you're frustrated, and rather than continuing to be frustrated, you're like, I'm going to be a part of the solution for this. What advice would you give to somebody that is interested in entrepreneurship? But doesn't really know where to start.
Yeah. The starting is, I think, the hardest part. in the sense that like you have this idea and you're like, this is amazing. The passion is driving that next step. But then once you get down to the practicality of it, okay, now we actually have to put dollars to things or time to things, resources to things. So what my first recommendation is look at how you can set up benchmarks from that idea to fruition. And maybe like the fruition, the first benchmark might be getting the company URL, starting getting the company tax identification number, these little tiny things. And I would say that one thing that is really helpful that AI can be a part of is say, I have this business idea. I would like to set out 12 weeks, and this is what I would like to achieve at 12 weeks. Can you give me a week by week task list of things that I can do. And then you can start to like blend that into your current, what your time, okay, so maybe after the kid goes down, you have 2 hours. This is what you're going to get done and start to work at that. And then you can also go back to AI and say, hey, I didn't get this done. Can you revise my schedule so that it can still continue to blend and move with you? Because let's be honest, life is busy. I made a goal to work out this week. I did not. So I think that be realistic, but get something in writing that you can start to check off those benchmarks.
I love your idea of using AI to do this. I've been having
Mhm.
so many conversations with people of just how, as leaders and business owners, they're using AI in their life. And there's so many technologies out there that people don't know about. Can you share a couple different ways you've used AI besides just creating a schedule just for your business or your life?
Mhm. Yeah, so one way, and it kind of does go off of the schedule, but that's the first thing I thought of is like with this book release and this book launch, I'm not good at social media. I'm not good at self promotion. I'm good at doing the heavy lifting and the work. But I said I need to make sure that I am promoting that, making sure that this book gets in front of the right people because essentially it's about impact. And if I don't get the right amount of change makers or the right change makers on my team, I really am only so effective. So what I was able to do with a prompt, I only operate on LinkedIn and Substack, and I specified that. Can you give me here's my book chapter titles, and then here's like the blog post topics that I'm writing every single month. Can you blend this in and tell me what I need to be doing on a weekly basis to maximize my impact? So that one was really helpful. The other thing is we've been going through our job descriptions, and that's sometimes as a CEO, especially when you're building like the plane as you're flying it, you may have overlapping job descriptions that you didn't really know existed because typically you are like we did this year, we hired a new person that was in an entirely new position that really didn't have a complete job description from like another company that we could kind of mimic or mirror. So it was really nice to use AI to say, okay, here's what our other leaders in this the same level are doing. Here's their job descriptions. Can you help me come up with a new job description for this individual? Here's the tasks that they're going to be doing. And then is there anything that we need to do to change the other executives' job description to make sure that they both represent this line of leadership cohesively?
So yeah, like you're really using it to kind of help build out your org structure,
Mm.
your job descriptions, your career pathways within your organization, especially when it's like not all small businesses have an HR person there to do that for them. And
Yep.
so I love AI because it pulls off of like some of the smartest people in the world that are also using AI. And then you're like, oh, I'm just learning from this, or oh, I didn't think about this, or I think the strong leaders are really embracing AI, not running from AI.
Yeah, and I'm going to be fully honest, it is scary, right? Like whenever you're dealing with something that gives you a glimpse into humanity as a whole, you you have to make sure it's being used for good and not bad. And
Yeah.
so part of being a part of understanding and learning what the control metrics should be is also learning how to control it. And so you have to be part of it. You can't run away from it because everybody else is doing it together, but we all have to realize that we're collective
Yeah.
in how we utilize this. And so I get it. I'm scared too, but I also am going to do my research and work really hard on how I can use it and then be the first voice if things are working out in a way that it shouldn't be used for.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Janaea, for sharing your journey and your leadership insights. It's been such a pleasure hearing about your experiences and your lessons along the way as a leader, as a woman, as an entrepreneur. And for our viewers, if you enjoyed hearing Danae's insights today, don't miss other Break the Norm leadership interviews. If your organization is interested in learning more about how Break the Norm leadership can help you develop your greatest asset, your people, click the link below. And then we will also be sharing the link for Danae's book in the comments below as well. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.